Did you come from a childhood where you had to grow up too fast? Or maybe you found yourself being emotionally responsible for the feelings or needs of your parents or parents when you were just a very young child yourself. Maybe you grew up in a household where there was a lot of pressure put on you at a very young age. And a lot of these different things can create their own form of attachment trauma, namely in the form of something known as parentification. And parentification is where a child basically has to play the emotional role of a parent at a young age, maybe soothing the caregivers or taking care of them emotionally or getting in between arguments or fights, or taking care of a parent who may struggle with some sort of mental health issue or going through their own trauma or grief. But we can also have instrumental parentification, where we have a child taking care of the other children, doing all the tasks around the house because one parent is too overburdened or overwhelmed. And parentification, actually, believe it or not, has a huge impact on our adult romantic relationships. It may be the very thing that is causing you to shut down, to feel overwhelmed, to feel resentful, to push people away, because at a deep level, you may be taking on far more than you realize and have some big roots of attachment trauma that actually come from parentification itself. So today I'm going to do something different with you and actually take you through a short master class. We're doing something different for the holidays. Mike is away. And I'm going to take you through a short masterclass on parentification because I think this is one of the most important things you can learn about if you have an insecure attachment style. And today we're going to talk a lot about parentification. So we're going to cover, first of all, what parentification is in so much detail. We're going to talk about what it feels like to be parentified so you can see, do you really see yourself in this? Was this your experience? We'll talk about why parents do this. What are some of the roots of what your own parents or caregivers may have experienced? And then I'm going to take you through 11 common symptoms that you have been parentified or signs you've been parentified as a child so you can see how many of those 11 do you have? Where are you ranking on that parentification scale? Are you really high, or did you just have a little bit of parentification? And then most importantly, we're going to go through 5 major pillars that are absolutely necessary to heal, and how this won't just heal you as a person, but actually heal your relationship fears, your relationship wounds, and allow you to finally get into relationships where you feel like people are showing up for you and in reciprocity the way that you show up for them. Not only helping you become more securely attached, but also helping you have truly fulfilling and thriving relationships. And I want to know, was this your experience? Which types of signs or symptoms of parentification do you have when we go through those 11? Did you have all of them, or were there specific ones that stuck out to you the most? For example, always playing the fixer or caretaker role in your relationships as an adult. Another example being that you may find yourself really resenting people and feeling like you love and give so much more than people are loving and giving to you. There's quite a few of them, and you may see yourself in there, but I want to hear from you. Which are yours? Which ones show up for you? And my hope is that listening to this today, you not only have this huge ability to recognize what's going on internally, but some really powerful tools to transmute it and to create change very efficiently so that you can build the best relationships of your life.
Her name is Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
I hope I pronounce her name properly. Thais Gibson.
I am so excited for you to be here with me today. Thank you for joining us. My name is Thais. I'm the founder of the Personal Development School. I spent over 10 years in client-based practice and eventually moved into the online space with a whole bunch of different courses and programs. And I'm really hoping that this will help you today discover more about your relationship patterns as an adult, how this actually plays a role in impacting your attachment style or love style, if you're newer to that term. And I myself come from a background as a fearful avoidant, aka disorganized attachment style, did a lot, and I mean a lot, of this inner healing and work myself. And as a result, it was so impactful for me. I really went on to want to share this so much with other people. So let's start. And if you're listening to this on audio, you can view the video version of this, and I will have some slides here that I will dive into. But I'm just going to start by sharing my screen so you can see some of these if you are listening, if you are watching online, so on YouTube. And if not, I'll explain everything so that you can still hear it, okay? If you're just listening in on audio. So first and foremost, parentification is when the parent has to act as the child, because they have their own internal issues they're going through. They often lean on the child to soothe them, and of course, what that does is that puts the child in the role of the parent. Now, we have two types, and this is really important. We have emotional parentification and we have instrumental parentification. Now, emotional parentification is what happens when the child becomes the emotional caretaker of the parent. And to be perfectly honest, this is something I grew up doing a lot. This is something where, I was in a household and there was a lot of chaos and a lot of fighting, and I would check on one parent after a big fight and then the other parent. And a lot of the times I would have one or both parents vent to me or share what they were feeling and experiencing, and oftentimes say not so great things about the other parent. And for me as a child, looking back, that gave me a sense of like control. I would talk to them and kind of learn what was going on and check on them, and knowing what they felt and experienced about each other gave me the sense of like, okay, maybe I have some context as to what's going on, but it also has a lot of really, really toxic downsides to it. So it would be an example of emotional parentification. Emotional parentification can also be, right, that you are in an environment or dynamic where your parents have substance use disorders, mental health issues, or personality disorders, and you find yourself being caught in the middle, having to caretake for that parent who's really unstable or who's going through their own complex grief. And so in those types of cases, that child goes into caretaking very much for the parent. Then we have instrumental parentification, and this is more common in the forms of neglect. And this is where you have a child who ends up taking on the tasks of the parent. So again, sort of that example I mentioned earlier, maybe you're a 5-year-old child or a 7-year-old kid, and you're taking care of your 5-year-old sibling, your 3-year-old sibling, and you're making sure they're eating and in bed on time because you have a single mother and she's already working 2 jobs. And so there's just, because of the circumstances, this having to grow up too fast and take on the tasks of the parent. Now, this will impact us in many different ways, but this leads to the experience of the parentified child. And what this means is the experience of a child growing up in this environment. Number one, the child usually doesn't know that this is unhealthy because you don't know any better, right? You're a child. So you grow up in a household or an environment where you just don't know any better. This is what you're used to. And so this is what you come to expect of yourself. And interestingly, it's usually positively reinforced on one side and negatively reinforced if you're not doing it. So for example, let's say you have a parent who's an alcoholic, and that would create a lot of context for probably both emotional and instrumental parentification. And so you may find, for example, that you grow up and the parent comes home and they're clearly drinking too much, and you tuck them into bed and you get them some soup and some water, and maybe you're 7 or 8 years old. And when you do that, that parent gives you love. They say, oh, thank you, even though they're really drunk and they're not really able to be present, and they give you love and they, speak to you and are sort of kind to you in those moments. And so you think, okay, when I do this, I get loved and validated. This is my strategy that now gets conditioned in of when I need love or connection or support. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to show up. And so this can lead, okay, and this is a really important thing, and I'm so curious if this resonates with you. And if it does, I would seriously love to hear from you in the comments about this. But this may cause you as a child to believe that your worth is about being a caretaker. Okay, so your worthiness in relationships, what makes you worthy of love, of connection, of time, of any investment from anybody else, is about how good of a caretaker you are of others, because that would have been the way that you got conditioned, and everything is conditioning. You also may see that as a result of that, and I can't stress this enough either, really, as a result of this, you may see that because you grow up in an environment or household where you have to be so externally focused on that parent or parents, if there's a lot of chaos in the home, you're constantly looking outward to see how you can buffer out and protect yourself from that chaos. If you are growing up in a home where there's an alcoholic and you never know, how they're going to be behaving, or somebody with a personality disorder, you never know which kind of version of that person you're going to get. In all of those types of cases, you are going to see that there's no room for you. There's no room for you to feel into your own feelings and self-attune. But even more than that, you are not getting the mirroring and the messaging that is actually necessary during behavioral stages of development to help you grow and evolve. So if you don't have a parent who's attuning to your feelings And if you're stressed, they catch it. They notice it. They say, honey, what's wrong? Are you okay? And they try to soothe you or make it better. If you do not have a parent who can listen to your needs as an individual because they are too caught up in their own dramas, their own lives, their own experiences, then what ends up happening is you don't get something that securely attached people get very effectively, which is called approach-oriented behavior. And what that means is that you grew up in a household where a parent is first and foremost attuned to you. They are present with you. They notice when you're off or when you're upset, and they make an effort to do something about it, to check in with you, to soothe you. But if you don't have any of that, you don't learn how to give that to yourself, because so much of, as we grow throughout childhood and throughout different stages of behavioral development, so much of our growth is we learn to treat ourselves how we are treated by others. I often say to people, your internal dialogue is often your internalized dialogue. You will speak to yourself in your mind the way you are spoken to. But you will also learn to treat your own feelings the way that your feelings are treated. If they're ignored, dismissed, denied, guess who's going to ignore, dismiss, deny your own feelings as an adult? You are. If your feelings are shamed or criticized if you try to express them, or they are neglected, you will do the same thing to yourself as an adult. If you grow up in a household where you are actively punished for having needs, well, you're going to punish yourself for having needs or shame yourself for even trying to have them in relationships to others as an adult. And if you feel like those needs are not met, not seen, not heard, those basic needs that you may have as an individual, guess what happens as an adult? You think to be in relationships with other people, I have to block and suppress any needs that I have and just become who they need me to be. And so you're going to see that this produces, as an adult, not just often extreme codependent and people-pleasing behaviors, but also a very deeply reduced ability to properly self-care. And what I mean by that is you may even find that you have poor habits around sleeping, going to bed on time, eating healthily for yourself, hygiene, showing up for yourself to actually just check in with yourself and how you're feeling, to show up for your mission, vision, goals, dreams in life, because you're so busy taking care of everybody else. And so one of the things that happens with a parentified child is that there's this void of freedom and void of the ability to be carefree that a children should experience. And as trauma has it, and this parentification is a form of trauma, as trauma always tends to go, we respond to traumatic events in polarity. So you've often, and this is a bit of a trigger warning example, but you'll often see, I think the statistic is something like 88% of individuals who grew up in abusive households either become, as an adult, in at least one important relationship in their life, the victim or the perpetrator of abuse. Because we either think, oh my goodness, this is what love is, so I am going to just end up in a relationship with somebody who treats me like that again, and you're the victim. Or we think, oh my gosh, this was so painful, I have to get as far away from being the victim of abuse as possible. But in doing that, we form such strong coping mechanisms to self-protect that sometimes those coping mechanisms turn into being the perpetrator. And that's not me excusing that at all, but this is just the polarity that you'll see in trauma, right? The statistics, the facts, this is what tends to happen. And so when it comes to parentification, often as adults, you'll see that because that carefreeness, because there's that void of the freedom of having been a child, you will often see one of two things. You either become extremely rigid and controlling and stay in that parentified role and really caretake for everybody, or you may find instead, in certain cases, you become the person who never wants to grow up. You never want to grow up and take responsibility and accountability for your own life because you're yearning for that inner child that feels lost. So the parentified child may, in that case, associate relationships as being exhausting. They may experience a lot of burnout when it comes to adult connection. I mean, one of the biggest things that happens in the life of a parentified child in their adult experience is that they become somebody who is always in one-way relationships, right? If you are the person who comes out of being parentified and you think, okay, all of my worth and all of my ability to be loved is about me giving and caretaking and knowing what other people need and becoming that. And if going through your whole childhood, there was no space and attunement and room for you to have needs, for you to have feelings, and you were punished or rejected if you tried to have those things, well, then that's how you learn to relate to people as an adult. There's no room for your feelings and needs. It's almost an unknown. You don't even realize that your feelings and needs could be shared or inserted. And you probably go through a lot of your life trying to soothe yourself internally by numbing or repressing or avoiding or escaping yourself in some form, and just going into a perpetual state of trying to caretake for others. And of course, that will lead to burnout. And you may feel as an adult, that you are on this hamster wheel of effort and stress in your relationships, and you may very much struggle to receive care from other people. I can't stress this part enough, like how hard it may be for you to receive love and care from other people, either because you don't trust it, or you think that you're going to be a burden because you grew up feeling like that if you did try to have needs, or you think I'm just responsible for taking care of other people. I have to earn my worth with them. And so there's no room for me to need anything from anybody, because then I'm not earning my worth. And you may actually feel a sense of fear of being helpless if you do ask for anything and then try to rely on people. It just might make you feel very squirmish and scared. Oh my God, I can't rely on anybody else. That's scary. That's not going to work. And even dynamics of feeling like, if I do rely on people, I'm just going to get abandoned. People are going to think I'm too much, or they're going to be frustrated with me. And so as an adult, you will often yearn for love, but have very little idea of how to properly receive it. And parentified children in some cases can be very successful in the external world. They're really good under pressure and in chaos, and it's kind of this subconscious comfort zone. But that will always come with a downside if you don't learn balance. And I want to pause here for a second and just say something, because I think a lot of people hear this and maybe hear themselves in this, and they say, oh, I better stop caring for other people so much. But before we get into like, what are the signs that you are parentified? And we'll go through 11 signs, and how do you often view love as an adult, and then how to heal it. I do want to let you know that nothing about healing this is a subtraction. Nothing about healing this is stop empathizing so much, stop caring for other people, stop wanting to contribute. It is not a subtraction. It is an addition. It is learn to care for yourself the way that you have cared for others. Learn to attune to your feelings as much as and equal to the way that you have attuned to others. Learn to honor your boundaries the way you try to honor those of others. Learn to advocate for your needs the way that you will advocate for others. And when we can actually take something where we're down here and not showing up, and we can bring ourselves up to here, that when we are able to treat ourselves equally to others, that is when we will start to really heal this dynamic. And it will allow us to deeply see and connect with other people, but no longer at the expense of ourselves. Okay. So why do parents act this way? Some big things you'll see is that a lot of parents either themselves have a tremendous amount of emotional distress, complex trauma, personality disorders, a lot of wounds and unmet needs. Sometimes we'll grow up with somebody who has a parent who in the family maybe is being abused by another parent, and they don't have an outlet for it. They don't have the ability. They're too scared to tell anybody, and so they go to the children. And that can be a common theme. Or they were taught just to be extremely codependent themselves and have no idea how to take care of themselves either. And so there can be really endless cases in here: addiction, trauma, generational trauma, of course, sort of being passed down over and over again. But a lot of times parents who parented their children in this way also, interestingly enough, really had very little idea that they were causing their own children pain and suffering. Okay, so often it's an unknown, and sometimes, unfortunately, you'll even go to a parent and try to tell them this, and they will say something like, oh, it was fine. Your childhood wasn't that bad. Stop complaining. My childhood was harder. Or what about people whose parents went to war? Or you'll hear these kinds of messaging, and it's like, well, there's still a really big impact of this. And so much of healing a relationship with your parent is being able to have them acknowledge. And what you'll learn today is, if your parent is not available for acknowledgement or validation of these sorts of issues and working through these things to have healthy boundaries and things of that nature in the relationship with them, you can give to yourself what they couldn't give to you. And that actually also becomes a huge part of your healing. So if somebody isn't able to give it to you, you can still be okay. Now, 11 major signs and symptoms. And this is where, if you are somebody who may have been parentified, it can be so valuable to just see like where you're rating out of these 11 signs. These are the most common. The first one being that you struggle intensely with boundaries. The second one being that you may be overly self-reliant as an adult. In other words, you may find yourself having a lot of difficulty connecting to other people in terms of receiving. So you may really be scared to ask for help or ask for support or ask for encouragement or really for any of your needs. Because if you look at your whole conditioned upbringing, that didn't go well anytime you had to take up space or tried to have needs. And so, of course, you become overly self-reliant as an adult because it terrifies you. A lot of times as well, you'll see that there may be a lot of fear or confusion when it comes to receiving help or support in others, not just being overly self-reliant as a coping mechanism, but actually being actively afraid or confused about what does that even look like or how do people even do that? Maybe finding yourself that you really struggle to trust that other people can take care of themselves. And you may find that you are always playing the fixer role in relationships. You may even think that love is about you caretaking for other people. And that may not just be in your romantic relationships, but the caretaking role in friendships, family relationships, and of course, your romantic. But then also finding yourself relating to other people in codependent and enmeshed ways, feeling responsible for their emotions, their feelings, enabling people sometimes by accident because you're just so scared of seeing other people in pain, feeling like you have to do it for people. All of those things really go into a lot of codependency and enmeshment. And you may find that as an adult, you still take care of your parents in quite a lot of extremes. And of course, if you are somebody who is parentified and you still have these patterns alive and haven't worked on them, you are going to find that you experience a lot of resentment, anxiety, and pressure as an adult. Why? Well, because parentified patterns in our love and connection in relationships are parentified patterns. I mean, what that ends up creating is dynamics where you are going to find over and over again that you have these overly high expectations of how you are going to show up for other people, but then you're struggling to receive. And so what that means is you're going to be in a lot of one-way relationships where you overgive, under-receive, or even actively block yourself from receiving. No wonder you end up experiencing things going this way, okay? And then, of course, you will see that there tends to be a lot of sometimes treating partners as if you're a parent, almost like relating to partners in a parental way, and over empathizing with other people at the expense of yourself. People who are parentified have a very difficult time seeing themselves in real time. And what I mean by this is that you may find yourself so attuned to like what everybody else is feeling and needing. But then when it comes to what you are feeling and needing, you might have a hard time even recognizing. So you may, for example, see that you go to a party or a networking event or a get together and you get home from that and you're like, whoa, what that person said 3 hours ago actually was very offensive and it really hurt my feelings. But you didn't realize in real time because you are so attuned to everybody outside of yourself that the casualty in that becomes you're not able to attune to yourself in real time much at all. Or you may find in another way that you end up feeling like somebody asks you for something or, says, hey, can you do this for me? Or can you attend this thing with me? And you just compulsively say yes without ever actually self-considering what you feel about that, or if it's a true yes or no for you or not. And so you may have a really difficult time when you can't attune to yourself, connecting to your own emotions, recognizing what's going on inside of you. So a lot of what happens is as a parentified adult, you may feel overwhelmed about love. You view love as overwhelming, stressful, confusing, demanding. You may find yourself yearning for love and yet pushing it away. You may find yourself being very afraid to be truly seen and afraid of relying on other people and then being disappointed and left feeling helpless. You may become rigid or controlling. And sometimes love can threaten this. Sometimes love and feeling feelings can be scary and feel actually threatening because it can feel like love is messy and feelings are messy and things aren't always in control and you may sabotage. And you may really struggle with trusting other people to show up with long-term commitments. And again, like I sort of mentioned earlier, resent others easily or be attracted to wounded people. I just wanted to pop in here and let you know we are doing a 7-day free trial to the All Access Membership Pass at PDS, which means you get access to literally everything inside of the school. And this includes the 4 live webinars I do with our students every single week. And on top of that, you get access to all of our different courses. We have over 55 different courses on relationships, communication, boundaries, emotional mastery, guilt and shame, learning your needs, so many different facets that are really important to master our lives and feel really good about our lives going forward. And last but not least, there's a daily community event. We have trained facilitators and coaches who are in there doing that work, showing up to support you on your journey every single day. Please join me on the other side. Come check it out. See if it's a fit for you. I'd love to see you there. Go ahead and sign up by clicking the link in the description box below. So I want to talk about what we can do to heal, okay? One of the first things is we have to work through our stories, okay? What I mean by our stories is we all develop beliefs because of the way we go through life. And these beliefs often, unfortunately, become self-fulfilling prophecies unless we work on them. But these beliefs are often things that dictate how we view the world and are things that we project back out onto our external world as well. If you imagine for a moment that you are in the forest and you see a bear and you run away from the bear, and thank goodness you're safe from the bear, but the very next day you have to go into the forest again. Well, what does your mind do? It goes through the forest and it looks and looks and looks and it goes, oh my God, where's the bear? Is it behind that tree? Is it coming out over here? What's going on? So what happens is our subconscious mind, when we have threatening experiences or really strongly emotional experiences, the subconscious mind stores them. And then we see our world through that lens. So essentially, we are accidentally reprojecting the likelihood of this fear from occurring again. So we think, for example, if we were abandoned in childhood, we constantly are like, when's the abandonment coming? Who's going to abandon me? Just like the bear in the woods. Where's the bear? When is it coming? Or if you felt betrayed a lot in childhood, how can I trust somebody? That person's probably lying, or sooner or later they will lie or betray me. Or if we felt helpless, we're like, I can't rely on anybody, that everybody's just going to leave me feeling helpless and not meeting my needs. So there's some big core wounds that we talk about so much on this channel and so much inside of the personal development school. There's actually a course you can check out fully for free. And you'll be able to get through this all within probably 7 days or less. But it's called the Emotional Mastery and Belief Reprogramming course. And even if you just want to jump to that course, you can go into the exercise called auto-suggestion. It's in the second module or third module, and it just helps you rewire these beliefs. And this is honestly one of the most important things you'll do, is rewire some of these things that are deeply stored subconscious, believing you're unworthy of love, and so acting accordingly, like you always have to earn your worth, or believing that you don't belong, and so keeping everybody at arm's length and staying on the outside, or believing everybody will betray you. And so you just can never figure out how to actually trust and let people in. I mean, all of these things cause you tremendous havoc in your adult relationships, and honestly will prevent you from being in a position where you can have healthy and secure love. As long as you're believing that you can never trust, that you're always going to be abandoned, or that you're weak if you open up, or nobody will ever understand you, or you're trapped. As long as you're believing these things, of course, you're going to find yourself constantly pushing people away or sabotaging relationships. And there's another course you can check out too for free. And by the way, I'm going to go through a whole bunch of other things. I'm just kind of glazing over this one because we talk about this so much on this podcast or on our YouTube channel. But if you want to go deeper, then you have a free resource here. There's also a course called Principles and Tools to Reprogram Your Subconscious, and that will take you through, there's 21 different reprogramming tools, all based on neuroplasticity, hypnosis, the subconscious mind. So you can actually rewire some of these big fears that you have on your own time. And they will stop rearing their head in relationships over and over and over again, to the detriment of how you feel, because these are the things that trigger us the most, and to the detriment of sometimes breaking apart or sabotaging our relationships over and over and over again. Once you've rewired some core wounds, okay, that's sort of like the first major pillar, okay, is getting these ideas out of your subconscious so you don't constantly think, oh my gosh, I'm bad if I ever make somebody responsible for their own lives. Oh, I'm a terrible person for that. Or I'm going to be abandoned if I express my needs at all. Like, we have to get those ideas out. The second major thing, okay, is we have to learn to practice emotional vulnerability. Now, what does that mean? Okay, what does emotional vulnerability even mean? Well, what we see is that emotional vulnerability starts in the relationship with yourself. So if you grew up in a household where nobody was present with you nearly enough, then you need to learn to give that presence to yourself and build a relationship with your own emotions. You have to learn to be in your body again. And what you'll often see with very parentified kids is that they end up in relationships and dynamics where they feel so deeply unseen because nobody's seeing them the way they're seeing others. And that includes the relationship you have to yourself. That includes you. So you may find over and over again that you go through relationship and relationship after relationship, not knowing what you're feeling a lot of the time until later, or until it's reached this critical threshold where you're now really triggered. And you may find as well that you end up in situations where because you are leaving your own emotions alone and out of consideration and out of the loop, you don't have the information to give to people about what hurts you or affects you or what you need or what's going on, because your feelings are your feedback. They are your messengers. They are always letting you know when something is out of alignment. A lot of us learn that, vulnerability is not okay. Or, if you grew up as a child and you were vulnerable and it wasn't met with anything positive, when you felt stressed or you emoted or showed your feelings, if it was just met with shaming or dismissal, well, then of course you end up in a situation where as an adult, right, you feel like emotional vulnerability is unsafe. And so you will dismiss, reject, deny your own emotions, but your own emotions are your feedback mechanisms. I often give this analogy that if you dropped me in a new country and I didn't speak the same language as a single soul in my vicinity, and let's say for whatever reason, I didn't have any access to technology and I couldn't talk to my family or husband or friends or anybody like that, I would feel lonely eventually, right? Maybe it would take a few days because I like spending time with myself, but then eventually I would feel this sense of loneliness a little bit. And that's a good thing. I should feel that way because I have a big need as a person for emotional connection. I really like having deep conversations and connecting with people. And so I should feel that way. My emotions are supporting me. They're going, hey, pay attention. You have an unmet need here. Figure it out, adapt, survive, evolve, figure out what's causing it, do something about it, learn the language, find some technology to communicate back home. Like, that's helping you. But what happens is if you grow up thinking that your emotions are so bad and that you can't have space or room for them, you suppress them and you lose out on all of this feedback, all of this information that you could leverage to live a better life, because you'd be like, oh yeah, I don't have this need met. Oh, why am I feeling upset? Oh, because I have a boundary. Let me set it. Oh, I have an unmet need. Let me action it out. Oh, I'm being really critical of myself and my internal dialogue. Let me course correct. Your emotions are always telling you when one of those things is out of alignment. And so if you're in a position where you're constantly ignoring this and ignoring yourself, well, then you're treating yourself just like the parentifying parent treated you. And so emotional vulnerability starts within ourselves. And once we feel comfortable getting in touch with what we're feeling, in touch with what we're needing, and being able to action this out, then we can start actually sharing this with others. And emotional vulnerability becomes something we can apply in our relationships. Now, I want to tell you something here. I grew up being somebody who was not good at emotional vulnerability at all. I probably seemed like that to the outside because I was good at connecting with people and getting them to be emotionally vulnerable, but I did not know how to open up at all. And I grew up a lot of the time feeling like, oh, nobody loves me the way I love them, or nobody cares about me the way I care about them. But after practicing emotional vulnerability and learning about my feelings, learning about my needs, having that language to then convey that to people in my life, one of the most healing things for me was how surprising it was that if I just told somebody what I needed, they would show up. And all these people in my life that I was like, oh, they don't really care. When I started communicating and opening up and being more vulnerable, it was almost like, wow, all these people cared the whole time. And they showed up and they did things, or they offered support. And so that allowed me to actually receive, because without being emotionally vulnerable, people just always are going to think you're fine. And trust me, if you were the parentified child, you probably had to always be fine and pretend like everything was okay, or toughen up, or get through it, or figure it out. And so you're recreating that dynamic for yourself as an adult until you learn how to dig deep and do this work. And trust me, it is scary at the beginning. It feels so scary if you grew up so much of your childhood with your emotional needs or other needs being invalidated or dismissed or rejected. You assume that that's going to happen with everybody you talk to. And don't get me wrong, you may have people that don't give you the best answer or don't show up in the best way in response. But You do this for you, because what ends up happening is you'll be beautifully and pleasantly surprised by how much people do show care when you do just communicate vulnerably and honestly. But then at the same time, if somebody doesn't show up, let's say you do this with 5 people in your life and one of them doesn't show up in the way you needed, but 4 of them do, great. Go invest in the relationship with those 4 people, grow those relationships, and take a step back from this one over here. It doesn't mean you have to cut anybody out of your life, but you can just take a step back. And over time, as you keep doing that and keep investing in relationships intentionally, maybe with new people in your life who do reciprocate, who do meet your needs when you share them and express them and communicate them, who do support you emotionally when you are able to share those things, you're going to see that you're building. You look back one day and you're like, wow, I built all of these deeply enriching friendships and relationships, and I had no idea that this is what I was missing out on. Okay, so really important. So far we have worked through your stories. There's the free courses for how to do that. Rewire your subconscious mind. These ideas that you're bad or alone or unworthy or not good enough or always going to be rejected or abandoned. Rewiring those free course links are down below. Number 2, practicing emotional vulnerability by getting in your body, listening to your emotions, and then starting to share those emotions and needs with other people. And also learning to meet those needs yourself. Now, I want to do one last thing here. Because we have 2 other pillars after this, but for healing. But I want to ask you, and this can be an exercise you do later or pause and come back to, but I want you to sit and ask yourself, okay, what were the biggest needs that I had in childhood? So I want you to make a list, and this can be a mental list if you're listening to this and don't have a pen and paper handy, or you're at work or on the subway or something like that. But this can be something you sit down and do if you feel called to, with a pen and paper if you're at home. And I want you to make a list of all of the things you didn't have from childhood. Okay, the list of the things that you wish your caregivers or parents did, saw, understood about you, the things that you thought were deeply missing, and even are missing from your life currently. And some things that we'll commonly see here are feeling unseen, feeling like you didn't have somebody to be present with you, to validate your emotions, to notice what you were feeling and try to support you, to be accepting of your emotions, to protect you sometimes, to have your back, or hear your boundaries and respect them. Or sometimes you may find that you didn't feel validated or encouraged, or you didn't feel like you could really go to somebody in a way and receive feedback or information or rely on people. So I want you to make a list and sit with this and really think about it. Those are the most common answers that I'll hear. And then I want you to draw a column down your page, okay? Or you can kind of do this mentally if you're doing this in your head. And I want you to think of those needs that you just said or thought of, and I want you to ask yourself, how much are you meeting these needs in the relationship to yourself from 1 to 10? And a lot of times you'll see, unless you've been doing some sort of work, that usually you're like, oh, somebody wasn't present with me. Wow, I'm really not present with myself. I'm like a 1 out of 10. Okay, somebody didn't make me feel seen and heard. Wow, I never really see and hear my own emotions. Oh, I didn't feel protected. Wow, I don't protect myself by asserting my needs and boundaries as an adult. So what you'll see is basically a lot of our conditioning is what is done to us, we do to ourselves. And that's actually how we're keeping these painful patterns alive. If we put an end to that, we would put an end to firing and wiring the same neural pathways and neural networks that are creating this output of behaviors. So I want you to ask yourself, again, like, this is so great if you sit down and do this, but you can do a little bit of this mentally, almost in a third column on your page. What am I going to do differently when it comes to these needs? Okay, how am I going to show up differently to meet these needs? If I want to feel seen and heard, maybe I journal, or I do nervous system regulation, or I attune to my emotions more. If I want to feel protected, maybe I start practicing setting boundaries every day, even small boundaries to start, and do a little bit of exposure work until I feel more comfortable setting boundaries over time. Start with the small, easy ones first and work up to the harder ones, right? So you want to have something that's keeping you clear, because you becoming your own parent and giving to yourself all the things you couldn't get is one of the biggest, fastest ways to heal your own attachment trauma and your own subconscious programming. And then I'll sort of leave you with this. as an honorable mention of the last two things. And keep in mind, if you do want to do a deep dive into these things, there's two more important pillars, but we do have, again, free courses you can check out fully free for a limited time down below. So we'll put that link. We have a boundaries course and a nervous system regulation course. And two of the things that you'll see coming out of a childhood of being parentified is that it's very hard to set boundaries. It's very hard to even know what boundaries are all about. And boundaries starts with learning to attune to yourself. You can't know what a boundary is or whether or not it was violated if you don't know how to consider what you're feeling internally in the moment that somebody tries to violate a boundary. So if in the moment somebody tries to violate a boundary and you're so busy focused on them and pleasing them, you can't feel into what your boundaries are. It becomes very difficult. But if you start practicing getting in your body by regulating your nervous system and noticing what your feelings are, boundaries, being good at boundary setting requires the subtle art of self-consideration. The art of being able to, somebody says, hey, I want you to do this all weekend with me. Are you going to do it? And you being able to attune to yourself and notice in real time, do I feel like doing that? Is that something I want to do? And a lot of parentified kids, because they had to be so externally focused on their parents' needs and feelings and expectations, they lost the ability to self-attune. And so it became they just attuned to everybody else but themselves. And so when we start getting back in our body, that happens through that emotional vulnerability with self that we talked about earlier, but it also happens through learning to regulate your nervous system, having a daily habit that's like you can sit down, you can meditate for 10, 15 minutes, maybe of a Vipassana meditation. Notice the sensations in your body. Notice your feelings and emotions. Maybe set 5 alarms on your phone throughout the day. One when you first wake up, one when you are heading out the door to work, one at lunchtime, one on the way home from work, one before bed. And when those alarms go off, you're like, what am I feeling? What's going on inside of my body? What emotions do I feel and why? And you start attuning to yourself. And when you, over 21 days, because it takes at least 21 days to start building a new habit and getting neural pathways that are strong enough that we start to get momentum and stickiness, if you can start building these patterns for yourself where you check in with yourself more often, you get used to that, you start noticing your feelings, start noticing your needs. If you can do that, you are undoing what was done to you in your childhood. You are working through these different painful parameters. And so starting with a meditation or breath work or checking in throughout the day with your emotions, starting with things that are getting you back into attunement with self, back present with what your own internal world is all about, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, this will go an extraordinarily long way. And that will then empower you for the last pillar, to learn to set healthy boundaries. And boundaries require you to basically check in with yourself, see what you're feeling, see what you're needing, and then actually communicate it to other people. So that is it for today in this short masterclass of, working through your feelings and needs and getting more into a place where you're undoing the parentification of childhood, because it is its own form of trauma, being the parentified adult, and it will absolutely create not just so much attachment trauma. And by the way, you'll see that parentification is most often associated with the fearful avoidant attachment style, the enmeshed dismissive avoidant, who often takes on a lot of parentification as a child and then really rejects it and doesn't want to grow up or go there as an adult. And we even have anxious attachment styles in a big way with the codependency. So, there's strong associations between different insecure attachment styles, and learning to work through this will be such a powerful step to healing, to becoming more secure, and to seeing a lot of growth. Now, I also want to let you know, if you want to do a deeper dive again, you've got those free courses, but you can also check out the free in-depth course on parentification if you want to go a little bit deeper. But I'm really hoping this was helpful for you today, that this hit home. Maybe you saw yourself in some of this. And thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing if you are listening in on YouTube, or if you're listening on your car ride from home. I hope you follow this podcast. You can also check out the full video version on YouTube, or if you're coming from YouTube, you can listen to some of these masterclasses or podcast episodes I do as well with Mike on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And thank you so much for stopping by and for watching. Please let me know questions you have down below, comments you have down below, or any future content that you want to see. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Share it with friends and family who are on their journey of personal development and growth. And thank you for listening. Next week, we'll be back with more insights to guide you on your journey. And until then, keep practicing our tools and strategies to change your subconscious mind and apply some of the powerful learnings from this podcast so that you experience real life transformation.